How would you describe this art style? It's pretty ugly, right? I know art is subjective and all that, but I think most people would agree that this anime is pretty ugly, which will scare a lot of people away from watching it. I know this because not only did my girlfriend entirely refuse to watch it when I told her to because it's quote too ugly, but I also haven't seen anyone actually talk about this anime despite how actually amazing it is, which to me can only mean that many people overlooked it just because it's ugly. This anime is Kotaro Lives Alone, one of those Netflix original anime in which we follow this silly little guy as he tries to live an independent life. When you first pick up Kotaro Lives Alone, it shows you this seemingly silly situation. This kid is living alone somehow. He comes and gives all his neighbors a box of tissues as he introduces himself to them. He has a seemingly endless amount of money and he talks like this.
My deepest of gratitudes. Verily, I must away.
All of this, paired with the general atmosphere as well as the soundtracks, creates this impression of this really silly show about this kid who mysteriously lives alone and seems to have some very strange values. But this is exactly how Kotaro Lives Alone gets you. On the surface, what we have is just a silly kid. But the more we get to know this kid, the more his actions make sense. And that is to our dismay. As Kotaro's silly way of speaking is a result of his parents' severe neglect, as he had to learn everything he knows, including how to speak, from watching this one show on TV. These tissues he gives his neighbors that you at first don't think much of are actually a special expensive brand of tissues that Kotaro buys because of the fact that these tissues use ingredients that make them taste sweet. Because in the past, Kotaro's parents have left him alone for an extended amount of time, which resulted in Kotaro having to eat tissues to satiate his hunger. This is why he thinks so much about exactly what tissues he buys. He prepares for another such event. And in giving these to his neighbors, what he's offering them isn't just some tissues, but a lifeline in case they're ever in danger of starving. Kotaro Lives Alone is constantly this back and forward as we learn more and more silly things about Kotaro just to find out what their origin is. I think Kotaro Lives Alone is a perfect depiction of a child that has gone through abuse. The way it affects every facet of his behavior, what makes him happy, what scares him, how he thinks about things, how he processes emotions. Every part of this kid has been touched by the abuse he suffered, and to me, the worst part of this show is that Kotaro still loves his parents. Kotaro holds on to his old memories of being abused dearly as memories of his beloved parents that he misses so much. He knows he can't see them because of how abusive they are, but to him, that's his fault. It's his fault that his parents treat him badly. If he was just a better kid, they wouldn't treat him this way. If only he was stronger, they wouldn't treat him this way. If only he was better, they would just treat him nicely and they would love him. Kotaro is constantly struggling to be better, to continue to live in hopes that he can one day be reunited with his parents. And that's just absolutely fucking heartbreaking. The different methods of abuse depicted in Kotaro Lives Alone are so specific and accurate. I can only pray for the original author of the manga this anime was based on, as this has to be tightly related to personal events that he or her has probably gone through, which sucks. Now, I say all of this, but at the end of the day, Kotaro is a hopeful story. A hopeful story which follows this kid as he doesn't let his past keep him down, as he pushes forwards. He may not be with his parents anymore, but he finds a new family within his neighbors, and the kids at kindergarten, and within the lady at the store, people from an old group home, and through his lawyer. Throughout the story, Kotaro gets more and more people around him that love and care for him. They might not actually be his parents, might not actually be his family by blood, but what does that matter? They're his actual family. They're the ones that are there for him, the ones that care. And this message that you can be happy despite your traumatic past is just plain beautiful to me. This all leads me to be so sad that this incredible story was overlooked for simply, well, how it looks. Should people really be limited to telling their story by their artistic ability? Recently, the bar has been raised, with Jujutsu Kaisen, Demon Slayer, and One Piece. These shows are easily some of the most high-quality stuff you can find out there. Visually, that is, at least. And these visuals are capable of blinding audience to flaws that would usually be apparent if the show, say, looked like this. Imagine if Gojo was animated like this instead of what you saw in Jujutsu Kaisen. I think then a lot of more people would pay attention to how badly this character is fucking written. But it's hard to give a fuck about his writing when he does this shit. And seeing the visuals of these shows are raising your eternal standards and creating a demand for more of this. Shows like these that are full of eye candy are way easier to enjoy and more accessible than something introspective that kind of forces you to use your brain to enjoy. Take for instance something like Perfect Blue. This is one of my favorite pieces of anime media ever, and when it comes to this deeper part of the anime fandom where we all have Evangelion in our top 3, yeah, it's a pretty popular show, but when we actually go to the mainstream audience, they're not gonna be fucking watching something like Perfect Blue because it's easier to just sit down, turn your brain off, and enjoy some pretty color shining. Which is fair enough. I mean, it's not like I'm some kind of saint that doesn't overlook anime just because it's ugly. The main reason I avoid things like shoujo anime and manga, despite how much I love romance, is simply because I think it's fucking ugly. I can't imagine watching this shit. Same goes for something like Blame. I've been thinking about reading it for years now, but it's just so fucking ugly. In a perfect world, we humans would be free of this judgment, free of being judged, and free of judging others. Because honestly, when does anything good come from judging things from just a surface level view? Sure, it's easier, but is it ever actually better? I'd argue no. I think judging things always ends up being a negative, not only towards the things we're judging, but also towards ourselves. I'm probably missing out on a lot of good fucking stories because of the fact that I can't really help but find them unbearably ugly. And you watching this, you're most definitely the same. Now, with everything I've talked about, you're probably expecting a conclusion where I tell people to stop judging by looks or whatever, but honestly, I'm not an idealist. As much as I would love to sit here and say appearances don't matter or some shit like that, I would just be lying. I have thought about this concept a lot, mostly when it comes to like romantic relationships, but also when it comes to other things. And looks do matter. Even after this video, I'm not gonna go and read Blame or some fucking shoujo manga because, well, I still think it's fucking ugly, and that's genuinely enough to ruin some stories for me, unfortunately. Anime and manga are both visual mediums. The visuals are a big part of telling the story, so if the visuals are lacking, unfortunately, that means the story is now doomed to also be lacking in this part of it. And if that scares people away, yeah, it is a damn shame, but what can you do? As much as it's nice to say looks don't play a part in who I date or befriend, that's just a lie. And I think unless you're completely blind or maybe like asexual, I don't know how that shit works, then looks probably matter to you too. Obviously, the amount looks matter varies from person to person, and I do still agree there's a certain point where you're letting looks matter too much and now you're just fucking shallow. But considering looks when you make decisions doesn't make you a bad person, because we have eyes for a reason. Y'all should still watch Kotaro Lives Alone though. Like that's the one exception.